41 years of marriage taught me exactly one thing about betrayal. It never knocks. It walks in wearing a family member's face. My name is Charles Greenberg. I'm 68 years old, and I've spent almost every year of my life on the water. I started Greenberg Boat Works with a rented slip, a folding card table, and a coffee can full of brass screws. 40 years later, it's 4 marinas stretched along Grand Traverse Bay, and a shop that still builds wooden runabouts by hand. My wife Eleanor was the reason any of it worked. I built the business. She built the home that made the business worth having. 9 months ago, I found her on our kitchen floor, a brain aneurysm, no warning, laughing at the television Saturday night, gone before Sunday's coffee finished brewing. The one thing of hers I could still reach out and touch sat in the boathouse behind our house, a 1958 Chris Craft Capri, mahogany hull, chrome trim. Eleanor bought the wreck of it at an estate auction 25 years ago for $400 and spent a quarter century bringing it back to life with her own hands. She called it the Grace. Everyone else on the peninsula called it Eleanor's boat, because there was never any question whose it was. Most mornings I'd walk out there with my coffee and just breathe. It was the only place the missing didn't feel so sharp. Then one Monday morning, I pushed open that door, and the lift was empty. Just a puddle of bilge water and a clean rectangle of concrete where 20 years of dust hadn't settled back yet. No broken locks, no forced entry. The security camera showed nothing but an empty dock. Someone had cut the feed at 11. Someone who knew exactly where the junction box was. Only 3 people had a key and the camera code. Me, our caretaker Frank, who was fishing in the UP with his phone off, and my son Tyler. I told myself there was an explanation. I was wrong about that, the way I'd be wrong about a lot of things that morning. Tyler had his own trailer, his own key, and knew our ramp better than anyone. He didn't have to break a single thing. My hands shook so hard it took 2 tries to call him. When he picked up, I heard boarding announcements behind him. He wasn't anywhere near home. "Where's your mother's boat, Tyler?" A pause. Not guilty, annoyed. "Okay, don't freak out. I sold it. Higgins took it off my hands yesterday. Megan and I are finally doing Europe. First class, the whole thing. She's been in a rough place since the funeral. She needed this. That boat was 25 years of your mother's life. It wasn't yours to sell. It's going to be mine eventually anyway. I just moved the timeline up." A boarding chime rang out. "It's a boat, Dad. We'll talk when we land." The line went dead. I stood there listening to nothing, and something cold and clear settled where the panic had been. 40 years running a company teaches you to smell a story that doesn't add up. First class for 2, even lavish, tops out around $40,000. I knew what the Grace was worth. We'd had it appraised for insurance 3 years back. A numbers matching 58 Capri in that condition sells for $300,000, easily. Tyler was arrogant, careless with people, but he was not stupid, and he had never once left $250,000 on a table. The trip wasn't the reason. It was the cover story. My phone rang again before I'd even lowered it. A Charlevoix number. Walter Higgins, the broker. "Mr. Greenberg, you need to come down here today. There's something your wife left inside that boat, and I think you need to see it before I do anything else." Standard practice on a sale that size, he explained. He'd only released a deposit, holding the rest in escrow until the title cleared. 30 days minimum. Tyler had shown up with a supposedly notarized power of attorney and a license matching the family name. Enough for a deposit check. Not enough for Walter to wire $260,000 to a stranger. "Your name's on the registration, sir. Everybody on this bay knows who you are. I found what your wife hid behind the dash, and today stopped being about paperwork." I hadn't signed anything. Whatever Tyler had handed him wasn't real, and neither of us said the word forged yet, but we both knew it was sitting right there in the room. I don't remember the 40-minute drive to Charlevoix. I remember standing in Walter's shop, looking down at a small fireproof lockbox on his workbench, a flash drive, a rubber-banded stack of papers gone brittle, and a spiral notebook in handwriting I would have known anywhere in the world. Eleanor's. The first page was dated a little over 2 years back. The first line read, "If anyone but me ever finds this, something has already gone wrong, and Charles needs to know everything." "Mr. Higgins," I said, "hold this boat. Don't sell it. Don't move it. I'll pay whatever it costs." "Whatever's in there," Walter said quietly. I hope it's not as bad as it looks. It was worse. I sat in my truck for the better part of an hour, reading my dead wife's handwriting by dashboard light. The notebook wasn't a diary, it was a ledger. Dates, dollar figures, initials instead of names, like she hadn't decided yet who she could trust with the truth. A vendor account that didn't match any real vendor. Invoices from our Charlevoix and Elk Rapids locations that spiked every quarter and quietly corrected before the annual audit. In blue ink in the margins. Doesn't add up, asked SR about the discrepancy. Got a story about a software glitch. Not buying it. Pulling 3 years of statements myself. SR, my VP of operations for 12 years, Scott Ramsey. A man I'd hired myself, stood up at his wedding, trusted with the keys to 4 marinas. The last entry was dated 11 days before Eleanor died. Found the wire transfers. Cayman accounts. This isn't Scott acting alone. There's a second signature on the authorization, and it isn't his. Talk to Charles Sunday. Everything's on the flash drive. Don't let this die with me. She'd found it, days before she died, and she never got the chance to tell me. I called Cynthia Blackburn, my attorney, Eleanor's closest friend outside the family, and told her everything. Her voice went flat and careful, the way it only did when she was genuinely worried. Don't call Scott, don't call Tyler. Don't tell anyone at the company anything is wrong. Get that flash drive to a forensic accountant before the sun comes up. Let's find out how deep this goes, before anyone has a chance to shred a file. Angry gets you sued. Proof gets you justice. By the second morning, I had a name where a signature should have been, and I still couldn't make myself believe it. Cynthia's forensic accountant, Rebecca Chen, met us at 7 a.m., with the drive already loaded. 3 hours later, she laid it out in cold, undeniable numbers. For 3 years, funds had been siphoned out of the Charlevoix and Elk Rapids accounts through a shell vendor called North Shore Marine Supply, a company that existed only on paper and a Cayman Islands bank account. Scott's authorization was on nearly every invoice, and on the wire transfers requiring a second executive signature above a certain threshold, there it was, plain as day on the screen. Tyler Greenberg. He's had signing authority since he started as regional manager, Rebecca said carefully, watching my face. A signature doesn't automatically mean he knew what he was signing. Some executives don't read every line. My son reads everything, I said. He negotiated his own trust fund distribution schedule at 26. Cynthia put a hand on my arm. Then let's find out for certain before we say another word to him. Some small, stubborn part of me kept hoping Rebecca was wrong. That part got smaller every hour. The total, once she finished tracing every wire, came to just over $2.1 million over 3 years, funneled through 2 North Shore accounts. One under Scott's name, one under a holding company registered to an address in Grand Rapids that traced back, after a day of digging, to Megan. Not Tyler. Megan had set up the second account 18 months earlier. Registered agent, filing fees, all of it. She was the one who'd moved the largest transfers out of the country. I thought about every dinner where she'd steered the conversation toward vacations, every comment about how tight things were on Tyler's salary when I knew exactly what that salary was. I thought about how she'd cried at Eleanor's funeral for exactly as long as it took people to notice, and not 1 second longer. Megan wasn't the icing on this scheme. She'd baked the whole cake. Tyler and Megan landed back in Michigan 5 days later, jet-lagged and tan, with no idea what was waiting. I asked them to come by the house that evening. Cynthia sat in the next room with the door cracked and a recorder running. Tyler walked in already talking. "Dad, before you start, I know the boat thing was harsh timing." "Sit down, Tyler." Something in my voice stopped him. "I want to talk about North Shore Marine Supply." The room went very still. Megan's thumb froze on her phone screen. "Never heard of it," Tyler said. "Too fast." "That's interesting, because your signature is on 11 wire authorizations sending company money to a North Shore account in the Cayman Islands. $2.1 million, give or take." "Dad, I sign 100 things a week. If Scott puts something in front of me..." Don't make this about Scott's paperwork. Your mother found this before she died. She wrote it all down. Dates, numbers, your initials right next to his. She was planning to tell me that Sunday morning, the same morning I found her on the kitchen floor. Megan's face went the color of old paper. "And the second account," I said. The one that received the largest transfers. That's not registered to Scott at all. It's registered to a holding company you filed. Megan, 18 months ago in Grand Rapids. I've negotiated boat contracts worth more than my son's net worth without my pulse changing. Watching my daughter-in-law's face collapse in real time, my hands shook so hard I had to press them flat against the table. Dad, listen. I don't want to hear another lie in this house. I stood, both palms on the table. Your mother spent 25 years restoring a boat with her bare hands, and you forged a power of attorney to sell it in an afternoon so you could buy plane tickets with money you'd already been stealing for 3 years. Get out of my house, both of you. My attorney will be in touch. You can't just... I built this company from a card table and a coffee can, Tyler. I can absolutely just... They left. I sat alone in that kitchen a long time afterward, listening to the quiet the way you listen to a wound to see how bad it actually is. I confronted Scott Ramsey in his own office a few days later. Rebecca's full trail spread across the desk between us. I expected denial. What I got instead was something close to relief. A man setting down a weight his shoulders had forgotten how to hold. Your son came to me 4 years ago complaining about his salary. Megan had expensive taste, and he had a chip on his shoulder about being handed a title without the money he thought should come with it. He came back a month later with North Shore already worked out. I should have walked into your office and told you. Instead, I took a cut. My wife found it, I said. 11 days before she died, she was going to tell me on a Sunday. She never got the chance. Scott's face went white. I didn't know that. I swear to you. Did Tyler know she'd found it? A long silence. I don't know. But he started moving faster with the transfers about 3 weeks before she passed. I figured he was just getting greedier. Now I'm wondering if he knew she was getting close. I won't pretend that sentence didn't do something to me. I spent that whole night wondering whether my own son had watched his mother start to unravel his fraud and simply decided to speed up instead of stop. I have never landed on an answer I can live with. Rebecca's report went to the U.S. Attorney's Office within the week. Wire fraud crossing international lines doesn't stay local for long. Cynthia froze every account Tyler and Megan touched, cut them from corporate insurance, and began the paperwork to strip Tyler from the family trust. Scott resigned before I could fire him and cooperated fully, which Cynthia said was likely the only thing standing between him and double the sentence he'd eventually get. Tyler and Megan hired a sharp young litigator who tried, for about a week, to argue the whole thing was an accounting misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a grieving father. That argument lasted exactly as long as it took federal prosecutors to lay out 11 signed wire authorizations. A forged power of attorney used to sell the grace out from under me, a shell company registered in Megan's name, and a dead woman's handwritten ledger with a chain of custody running straight from a hidden compartment in a boat's dashboard to a federal courtroom. Scott took a plea, 3 years, restitution on what could be traced to accounts he controlled directly. At sentencing, he looked at me once and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I believed him. It didn't change anything. Tyler and Megan went the full distance. 6 days of testimony. Rebecca walking 12 strangers through 3 years of wire transfers with a schoolteacher's patience. Eleanor's notebook entered as Exhibit A, her handwriting projected onto a screen in a courtroom she never lived to see. I sat in the gallery every day. Tyler never once turned around. Megan looked at me exactly once, on the final day, with an expression I still can't name. Not remorse. Something closer to disbelief that any of this had actually happened to her. The jury took 4 hours to convict them both, on wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and forgery. The judge gave Tyler 7 years. Megan got 9, the offshore holding company she'd personally structured, the one that laundered the largest transfers, weighed as evidence of a more calculated hand, even though her involvement had started after his. Watching my son stand up in a courtroom in a suit I bought him for his college graduation, hearing a stranger in a black robe tell him how many years of his life he'd traded for a stolen boat and a stolen fortune. There's no describing that. It just sat in my chest and refused to leave. Restitution recovered just over $1.9 million of the original $2.1, clawed back from the frozen offshore accounts before Megan's lawyers could finish arguing jurisdiction. I didn't want that money quietly folded back into the company's operating account like nothing had happened. Eleanor deserved better. So working with Cynthia and a small board of local doctors, I established the Eleanor Greenberg Foundation for Aneurysm Research and Awareness, right here in Traverse City, funding early detection screening at 3 regional hospitals, and research into exactly the kind of silent, symptomless warning signs that took her from me on an ordinary Saturday night. Her name is on hospital equipment now instead of a shell company's paperwork. That felt like the only correct ending for that money. As for Greenberg Boat Works, the fraud exposed rot I hadn't known to look for. I brought in an outside audit firm, replaced half the senior management, and this time I promoted from the docks, mechanics and dock hands who'd spent 20 years actually building the boats instead of managing spreadsheets about them. The business runs leaner now. Honestly, it runs better. Loyalty built on decades of real work turned out to be worth more than any resume with a fancy letterhead. I want to tell you the story ends there, clean and tidy. It doesn't. Tyler writes to me sometimes from the facility. I've read every letter. I haven't answered one yet, and I've made an uneasy peace with not knowing if I ever will. Grief and betrayal don't run on the same schedule, and I'm not going to force either one just for a tidier ending. What I did do, about a month after the trial, was drive out to Higgins Classic Boat Brokerage and buy back the Grace. Walter had kept his word the whole time, turning down 3 offers from collectors because, in his words, some boats just aren't for sale no matter what the paperwork says. I towed her home myself, back into the cradle where she'd sat for 25 years before that Monday morning I'll never stop thinking about. I go out there most evenings now. I sit in the Grace with a cup of coffee, run my hand along the mahogany Eleanor sanded smooth with her own 2 hands, and I remember her exactly the way she deserves, not as a footnote in a fraud case, but as the woman who spent 25 patient years turning a $400 wreck into something worth protecting, with everything I had left. She found the truth before any of the rest of us did. She just never got the chance to say it out loud. Betrayal doesn't always come from a stranger, and it doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, over 3 patient years, from the people who had every reason in the world to protect you instead. And sometimes the one who catches it isn't who anybody expects. It's the quiet one, at the workbench, with a notebook and a pen, who never once stopped paying attention.